So the first thing that we're going to cover today are kind of the challenges and use cases of innovation and transformation. I know that some of you have already heard parts of that presentation, so bear with me. But then as soon as we're done with that, we will go into the panel session with three awesome speakers from Salesforce, Microsoft, and SAP, really focusing on the partnering with startups, creating new products, and having a transformation, internal and external, from those organizations. So kind of discussing the best practices is going to be a panel session, but in order for us to prime ourselves for that session, we're just going to quickly talk about some of the use cases and how we can work on the innovation and transformation in general. So again, I hope you already watched the recordings that were for the speakers today. So if not a problem. We still have several questions ready to go. So we're just going to start our day today with those challenges and use cases of innovation transformation. I'm just quickly going to go maybe in 15 to 20 minutes, just really quickly cover some of the basics of it. And then we can go into the panel discussion where we can discuss further, deepen. And then if we have any questions about my presentation, or if we have questions to our panelists, we're going to end up in the wrap-up session. So without further ado, let's go and start talking about challenges and use case of innovation transformation. So the one thing that I want to say is that every new initiative is internal exercise. So what do I mean by that? Is that no matter what your goal is, no matter what your limitations, what your resources are, it's always an internal exercise, meaning that it still has to come from within. You cannot hire a consultant that suddenly is going to make your company innovative. You cannot somehow impose it on your company. So it's definitely always internal exercise. And even the most external of those cases where we're talking M&A is really still an internal exercise. As probably some of you know, I've been part of the M&A team in Goldman back in the day, and M&A is always a merger and acquisition. Buying some company is always an internal exercise, meaning that is it the best way to use the money that you have and the resources that you have to actually buy a new company, let's say a new region, or with new products, or expand in the new region, or build a new product. So on that front, I'm just quickly going to introduce myself. So again, I'm Vlas. I'm CEO at Silicon Valley Innovation Center. I spent pretty much the majority of my career on the Wall Street working for Goldman Sachs and for Wells Fargo Capital Markets. I also teach at the MBA program at the University of Utah, and I also worked on the startups as well, co-founded the SF Education. It's it's the biggest non-technical educational provider, online educational provider in Eastern Europe. So I worked on several projects in the Goldman Sachs that were kind of really transformative. I was working on the Apple Card. I was working on the Marcus, which is the first retail business for Goldman Sachs in 150 years. And I worked on a couple other more specific products that I put here on the screen. I don't want to focus too much on it. I just want to say that I had experience with a lot of very innovative, very different projects in the different spaces, so to speak. And therefore I can speak both from my own experience as well as the research and experience that I got working with the Fortune 500 companies and other Silicon Valley companies, be it startups, venture capital firms, some R&D departments of big institutions, just kind of all over the board. So again, very, very quick session, so I'm kind of going pretty fast about it. And the analogy that I like about the innovation transformation in general is this, right? So is pretty much our map that we're trying to get from point A to point B. And this is how we actually would like to have it, right? So we would like to say, okay, I'm starting here, and in 500 meters, I'm turning right, and then I'm turning right again, and so on and so forth, right? So it kind of gives us a step-by-step way to actually go and get to your point B. So for us, obviously, this is our status quo, our now here, and this is our bright future over here. And I really wanted to tell you that, you know, Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley Innovation Center figured out the secret sauce to getting from this now to this bright future, but unfortunately there isn't. And you can go and get your refund, right? But this is the life. There is no secret sauce. There is no like one case that would solve all of your problems. And that's why, as I said in the very beginning, it has to be an internal exercise. You have to focus you have to focus on your own case and just kind of transform some of the ideas that you have, transform some of the resources that you have into viable product. So, and success of that transformation is really defined by kind of four major things. So the first one is that what resources you have and are they available. So for our example, right, if we have a car, our journey is going to be different than if we take it in by foot. But not only that, for example, I can have a car, but then at the same time, my wife might have taken it, right? So I might have resources, but they might not be available to me. Meaning that, for example, I have, let's say, software developers on my companies, but they're working on some other projects that are of the higher priority. So therefore, I need to think about it a little bit differently. And the second thing is obviously implementation speed. And you already heard this mantra many times: fail fast, fail right, as kind of Silicon Valley style. But what it goes down to, it's not really about the failures and it's not really about the successes. It's really about how fast you can try something new and how quickly you can return. So pretty much if you go somewhere here and you made a wrong turn, this is not going to be a big loop. But if you do something like this will be a very long loop to return back to the journey. So therefore, implementation speed just allows you to kind of see what works and what doesn't. And therefore, the faster you can get some kind of results, the faster you can actually pivot and the faster you can adjust your strategy to achieve the success. Obviously, that knowing this space is extremely important, meaning that if you have it, if you already solved a similar problem, that might be actually be beneficial to that particular use case. So if you really know this space, if you really know how it works, maybe you did something similar, obviously your chances are higher. But then at the same time, what I think is the most important is that, and why I think that the general consulting for the innovation will not necessarily work, is that every situation is different. So for example, I did the retail loans or asset-backed securities back in Goldman Sachs. I know how to do it. I know how to start it from scratch. But then let's say if you're another financial institution hiring me, I have a lot of knowledge in this space. But then at the same time, the problem is that, well, your case is completely different. Yes, there are going to be similarities. Yes, I'll be more qualified to do it than the person who never did it. But nevertheless, I cannot give you this step-by-step direction just because your case is different. Meaning that I took that route once, somehow differently, might be completely different given your case, because maybe there is a construction somewhere, or maybe there is an accident right here, so you need to reroute and maybe go like this. So it's definitely the applicability of the existing solutions is probably the biggest challenge of the innovation, because nobody will guarantee you that this, what I did, let's say a year ago, will work now, even in the same organization, not even speaking about the different organizations. But then I guess the bigger issues, even on top of that, is that it's not only just me taking my car from point A to point B. It is a 500 people in your company, or 1,000 people in your company, or 5,000 people in your company trying to take in the same route to get from point A to point B. You cannot really innovate in the organization by yourself unless you are the sole proprietor and you have no workers involved, right? So, and the problem when you have those 500 to 5,000 people is that even if you give them exact direction, you know, some of them have Apples, some of them have iPhones, some of them are biking, some of them are driving, some of them have flip phones, right? So all of your solutions are suddenly become, you know, less relevant. So therefore, it's really important when we're trying to think about innovation, when we're trying to approach that journey, we really need to think about how we can communicate, more importantly, how we can communicate to all those 500 people that taken that road, that taken that journey, that we need to go to point A to point B with a certain turns along the way. So it is really important to actually understand how it's needed to be done, because again, it cannot be innovator within yourself. You need to get the ecosystem that will allow you to innovate. And it really goes along kind of three major topics. So the first one is alignment, the second one is resources, and the last one is confidence. So let's talk quickly about the alignment. And alignment is, and again, some of you already heard this. So an alignment is the way that how we can take all those 500, 5,000 people and just kind of align them why we do this. And the thought that I'm putting here is that innovation should change organization for better. And that seems to be a very kind of blank statement saying, yeah, duh, I mean, sure. But then at the same time, a lot of time people approach the innovation in sort of buzzwordsy approach. Let's say, oh, we need to do robotic process automation because it will save us time. So what, right? It is nice. It is nice for company to save time, but do you actually have resources to actually feel that save time? So for example, if you save 200 hours a year, what that person doing the job that right now you automated and save them 200 hours a year, what they will do. And this alignment about the organization and what, how we do the innovation should really change the overall organization for the better. We really need to take and think about how we can align those 500 people. So when they hear about innovation, they say, oh yeah, it makes sense. It solves my problem. It solves the problem for the company. And it really goes down to this messages, right? And I mean, in general, you can read, but the idea is that everyone, all of those 500 people, they need to be, they need to agree, or at least agree-ish with what you're doing. They need to be inspired. Management needs to get the strategy. And then the people, if you ask them to change their status quo, they need to be educated, right? So you cannot just say, hey, you know, we're gonna adopt some kind of new process and don't actually educate them on it, right? So it's really important that when we agree, when we're aligning everyone, we're giving everyone understanding and tools needed to actually go and make this particular process happen and make this particular process possible. And in order for us, the first step, the kind of agreeing and aspiring, making sure that everyone's seeing the value in it, it really should, this alignment should be simple. And what do I mean by that? Is that, and I'm going to share this presentation, and I'm going to, you can do this exercise by your own, but the idea that I have right here is that every company, be it a profit, be it non-profit, be it a governmental organization, really is focusing on these things, right? So it's earning revenue, it's saving on expenses, or it is satisfying regulator or some kind of governmental mandate, right? So maybe you are working on developing certain projects into certain parts of the world, and therefore you have a certain international governmental mandate to do this. But the idea is that your every action should lead to those three things. So for example, let's go back to this RPA, to this robotic process automation that saves 200 person hours a year for, let's say, 10 people. So the benefits that you can get, everyone would love that, but then the benefits and why we're doing it could be they can, in those 200 hours a year, they might take new projects, or they might work through more leads, or they might work through more projects, earning more revenue, right? That could be one, so they can earn more revenue. We can also, for example, if it saves, maybe we can let one person go, or let's say if we know that we have a big burnout within the organization, decreasing that burnout will actually lead to slower turnover. So you'll spend less money and less effort hiring and educating new people. So that might be saving you expenses. Or maybe at the same time, it could lead to the point where people make less mistakes because they're less tired, and therefore they will satisfy regulator, or they can get more creative with their mandate, and they can do their work better. Maybe their throughput could be higher, right? So it's really just making sure that you align those particular messages with all the actors within your ecosystem. And again, why it's important, because pretty much nobody will say that, well, we don't want to earn more revenue, or nobody's going to say that we're trying to save expenses. And that alignment allows, throughout the way, making sure that we're making those turns as we go through, that we can always say, okay, if our goal is to earn revenue, therefore we need to do in this situation A, B, and C. If our goal is save expenses, no matter what we do, right? Then we will be able to see, okay, maybe we thought it will save us some money, but it's not. So maybe we should not be pursuing that anymore, or we should pivot in the middle of the program. So that's why that alignment is extremely important, so everyone understand why are we doing this. And again, it should be extremely simple, and every organization does it for those three particular reasons. The next thing is resources. And resources is definitely something that companies have been built upon for the longest time, but right now the time is changing. So, and there are kind of several big development that I see in Silicon Valley. They're kind of redefining what is happening in the world, right? So the first one is shared economy, meaning that if you have any kind of assets and you can safely share them, why not? So for example, if let's say you had an office building or you have some space in general, and suddenly all of your workers prefer to work from home, maybe you can list that real estate out. And this is not necessarily something that is completely new. This is how actually Stanford made all of their money, pretty much, is that Stanford, the founder of the university, bought a bunch of land, and right now they're just leasing it out to all those different companies and making money on that. So or for example, another example that we have is that Autodesk, and you probably know this company, they're doing all of the different industrial design software, right? AutoCAD and all of this. What they're doing is that they had a prototype lab that where the Autodesk people would come in and manufacture. They had the lasers, they had the molding, they have the 3D printers. And what they did, they actually opened that lab, they opened that shop, so to speak, to the startups. So startups using Autodesk software, CAD software, can actually go into that lab and do their prototypes for free. And that's, again, that's just strengthening the presence. That is just saying, okay, instead of using any other tool, use ours, and then you can get access to all those tools. So it's really important to think what assets you can open up to actually use in the organization. And then the second thing is everything as a service, meaning that when our organization, right, is usually something like this. We have a stack. So somewhere we have a front office that's kind of like a revenue making part, right? We all have a revenue, which is a front office. And then here we have kind of like the reporting side, which is a back office. And then we have a middle office in between, right? We can have the trade processing, let's say, if we are in the banking. We can have, let's say, AML here and all of those, right? So it's really like, if you think about it, this is the process that the money goes in and then they go down, and then they end up in some kind of report or some kind of book of how it's being done. And usually in the majority of the cases that companies are really good at this, at making revenue. So for example, if you bank, your key business is to make money out of your banking products. If you are a pharmaceutical company, your key is actually to do the R&D, do the testing, and sell those products. And all of this is, so to speak, a just addition to support your primary operation. And the reason is that this is how usual companies work, right? If they could not do operations, they could not do legal work, or they could not do some kind of reporting, they would not do that, right? But unfortunately, they have to do it, and they have to kind of divert their resources from their main business model, which is earning money, right? But the good thing is that there are two good consequences of this approach. So the first good approach towards that is that there are actually companies who are making each of those instruments their key business. So we have a lot of companies who are providing AML as a service. There's a lot of companies who are providing reporting as a service. There's a lot of companies who provide account aggregation as a service. There's a lot of companies who provide R&D as a service. And you can pretty much outsource that portion. And the chances are that their processes are going to be better. Why? Because this is their main goal. This is their way to earn more money. And this is their specification. They earn money by being better than you. AML is anti-money laundering. So it's just making sure that there is no money laundering happening, right? And on the other side, the other aspect, that besides finding the companies for whom your sort of like back or middle office functions are the front office functions, and therefore they might be better than you might also have, let's say, a really great R&D department. Or maybe if you're in pharmaceutical, you might be extremely good, extremely well prepared. Let's say the clinical trial division. And they extremely good. They help you do your main revenue, but maybe they not 100% loaded. So what you can do is that you can actually open it up and take some other companies that maybe not your direct competitors, but take those clinical trials, use the expertise that you build to become as a service for someone. So why not do clinical trial as a service? You already have maybe a fantastic department that you spend years developing, but why not capitalize on it? And I know sometimes it becomes okay, but they might be our competitors, but there are creative ways of doing that. You might actually select what kind of clinical trials you're trying to do. And you have your network, you have your people, you have your knowledge that will help you to provide a better services than, let's say, others, and you can actually generate revenue from this. The other portion is viral marketing. And I'm going to go back to kind of pharmaceutical approach is that, well, you have probably the best minds in the world working, let's say, on the COVID-19 vaccine. So why not go and record short videos about what the vaccine does, how it works in general, just general education. Maybe you're in banking, or maybe you're in some kind of sustainable banking, and you have people who are doing really amazing things in the different parts of the world, and you can create a great story with almost minimal resources because you already have those people, you're already doing it. You just need pretty much an iPhone and a YouTube, so to speak, right? And by creating those videos, not only you will strengthen your brand, but you can also actually earn some money, right? And it sounds kind of silly, but if you have a strong brand that and you get a couple million watches a month, it could actually end up in the tens of millions of dollars that actually can produce additional income, and it can be extremely useful for your particular brand. So that's viral marketing. When you kind of creating this infotainment, when you take your specialists, they're probably the best in the world, the best in the region, and they kind of speak about something that can apply to the general population or maybe to some specific population. Maybe you can share some of the examples of how you can do, I don't know, some developing or some construction or some tools in general. So some of those things could be extremely useful and build your brand and kind of establish and bring inbound marketing without pretty much spending any additional dollars. Because if it does deliver the value, people will share, people will watch, and so on and so forth. Obviously, data monetization is extremely important, right? So, and what I mean by that is that the first step of data monetization is really just making sure that you can collect this data. And sometimes it is a big issue, like data warehousing and making sure that the data is in one spot and you can actually act on it is extremely important. And it is usually takes some time to actually get to this, but nevertheless, you need to collect this data. And then once this data is collected, you can use it internally. You can, sell it to the other parties, to the researchers. Maybe you can sell this data anonymized to the universities and they can do some research for you. But before you start actually systematically collecting this data, it will be extremely hard to actually monetize it, right? So you need to look in this. Business platformification, again, Andre, in our first conversation really touched this, and this is something really important as well, meaning that you can just take your existing businesses and go and kind of get through this particular process. And let me give you an example. Let's say you're an owner of the massage salon, right? And right now people are going to be working from home. And the question for the company becomes is that how do I actually provide the wellness? How do I provide a way to mental health, to the physical health, to my employees? So maybe what you can do right now for those who come to office, maybe like 30% of people, let's say you go to the companies and saying, hey, we have less people in the office, you can reduce your office space, but what about you increase your satisfaction of your employees by bringing massage therapists on site on the certain days? I have a massage salon. Can we do this, right? And you can go and you can establish this. And usually massage salons are underutilized, and you can actually bring the massage therapist to that particular location so they can give massages for that one particular company. But that's kind of non-scalable. What about if you partner up with a lot of massage salons, right? And you partner with a lot of companies. And you're saying, in one region, I have like 50% of the massage salons and I have 50% of the big companies. We're kind of doing this thing, right? And I'll take the fee from massage therapists coming to those offices. So let's say the office pays, I don't know, $30 an hour, and you take 20 or 10% out of it. That's kind of big, right? So why limit your business? Why limit what you're already doing with yourself? If you already have connections, if you already know how to do this business, open it up and just save on the and make money on this platformification and open it up. And then the last part that I want to touch really quick is the advisory board. So, and that's something that the Silicon Valley has been extremely famous for, is that, consulting doesn't really work for the startups, and consulting really in the modern world has, certain limitations. But what you can do instead is that, for example, venture capitalists, those with a lot of experience, those with a lot of connections, they sit on the board of directors of that particular companies, and they tell those young entrepreneurs what to do. They can suggest, well, you do this or you do that, or I can bring some of the connections, I can bring some of the technologies, I can bring some of the vendors that might actually speak to you and improve the business. So they're not really telling you how to do certain things, they just kind of navigate you. And that is extremely powerful case that, going back, someone who has the knowledge, but they don't actually do it, you still have to do it, but they kind of navigate you and put you into the right direction and the right spot right there with you. So like, for example, if you can hire me, let's say on the innovation, I will not go and do, go and do this and go and do that. I might steer you into the right direction and tell you, okay, how do you measuring this? How are you measuring that? And that way, what it will happen is that, since I'm not gonna, have a deliverable per se to deliver a plan, you are doing it internally, and you get people engaged, you get people motivated, because it is not me as a side consultant who comes in, gives you a deck of saying, hey, you need to be more agile, bye-bye, right? So I'm actually being a part of the team, but this is your team who's actually doing innovation, who's doing digital transformation. And this is extremely powerful concept that led that transformation from within and allows you to see new opportunities going forward. And then, just being cautious of time, the last thing is confidence, right? And I'm just going to quickly go through the slide. Is that innovation is obviously something new, and therefore there's always a possibility of failure, and there's a lot of limitations of how far you can plan. There is usually not objective data until you try to do something. There's also interactions with different parts of your company or with outside world that you might not be even aware of. And there's also undefined feedback, that in the beginning of the project, when you give somebody's idea, your idea, they kind of process this idea and they're saying, yes, this is great idea, go do it. But they might have a completely different impression of what you're actually trying to do. So it's extremely important to understand that the building the confidence starts with saying, there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of uncertainty built into the innovation, and therefore we need to handle through it, and we need to expect this innovation to happen. There is one more method that I described here, and it's called the failure report. You can read it through. So I'm again just being cautious of time. But one thing that I wanted to highlight, and I think it's extremely important, and I call it personally a paper minimally viable product. I know we have our panelists here, so I'm just about to shut up in a second. But what I'm trying to put here is, probably a lot of you heard about the minimally viable product, right? So a product that solves some kind of the issue very quick and in the very succinct manner. But what I also would like to say is that I would like to take this minimally viable product and turn it into the paper minimal viable product. What do I mean by that? Is that in the design, when you try to design UI and we try to design some kind of interface, a lot of people and a lot of best schools in design saying, forget about Figma, forget about any kind of sketching, just take a pen and take a paper and start drawing. Why? Because that takes all the distractions from, okay, this doesn't align, this font doesn't align, all of this away, and you can actually create. You can actually focus on what matters. And the same thing goes here. Technology cannot help you solve certain problems. Technology is just an enabler. Transformation comes from the processes. So for example, let's say Uber. Uber is super technological, super great idea. But in reality, you can actually do it with the phone pretty much, right? If somebody calls and say, hey, I need a car, you can look through the drivers that are available with their own cars, not the taxi drivers, with their own cars, call each and every one of them and say, hey, can you pick it up? Can you pick it up? Can you pick it up? And obviously technology makes it easier, but then it is not really the technology that helps. Another example is Netflix. Right? So Netflix could be online cinema, as there are millions of them on the internet. But what changed them is the content that they create. It has nothing to do with technology. Everything has to do with the process. And in my earlier example of the massage platform, like WorkSash for the massaging people at work, you don't need to know technology. You can use this whole thing in your Excel spreadsheet, or you can do it in your Google Sheets. So you can do a lot of things manually, and if by doing them manually you see the value and you still see the good business use case, then you can go to the technology, because technology, AI, ML will not let you transform your business processes. So it's extremely important when you think about innovation, start with this paper minimally viable project. If you can do a certain thing by hand, if you can do certain things pretty much on a piece of paper, and it still has value, it still has its core message intact, then you can build a technology on top of it. And that's kind of all of the quick primer for our panel discussion that is about to follow. And thank you so much. And we will go to the panel discussion. And then as we go through again, you might ask questions to me and to our panelists as well. So thank you so much. We have all of our speakers right now here. So I'm just going to kill my share and we can go to the presentation. Oh, sorry, to the discussion.